There's been a lot of talk lately about how the physical world connects in terms of infrastructure, in terms of roads and bridges, and all the things that go into making people get from one place to the other with ease.
Yeah, but there's a real flip side to this too. There's a mental infrastructure process, right, Brian?
And that actually, I believe, is more in dire need of triaging and fixing and building more than even the physical infrastructure.
Maybe.
Maybe.
But let's talk about it a little bit.
All right, Josh and I are going to riff today on this topic of mental infrastructure, today on Curiosity Continuum.
Hey, everybody, this is Josh.
And this is Brian.
Welcome to the podcast for Curiosity Continuum.
Curiosity Continuum is an industry innovating, non-traditional company, passionate about growing wisdom in the next generation.
We are the essential bridge between the analog and digital worlds by building collaborative communities that unleash the power of adaptive expertise and innovation needed to thrive in the 21st century.
We combine and mix essential elements needed to empower people to succeed in new ways, not possible outside of a creative, thoughtful, diverse community of fellow curious people.
Follow us on your favorite podcast app to receive notifications of new content. If you like what you hear and you want to dive deeper, visit us at curiositycontinuum.com. Thanks for tuning in, and let's start the conversation.
So even in our little intro section, we talk about a bridge.
Right.
An essential bridge, which is a piece of infrastructure. Josh, you want to, people know what a bridge is, know what a road is, but do you want to talk a little bit about how physical infrastructure works? I'll leave it to the person who studied to be an engineer to just regale people on that.
It literally is not rocket science. Physical infrastructure connects people from place to place, right? We have a road system. We have an interstate road system. We have a, airport system. We have, and within that, obviously, we have bridges that go over, go over things that you can't drive over. And we have seaports, which are also physical infrastructure. So all this infrastructure connects together and if you ever look at a map of all the infrastructure we have, there's a lot of it. Because the United States, for example, is a huge nation. I mean, it's not small. And so we connect together, and it's kind of amazing, really, that like I can drive down to the airport and I could go see Brian, and I don't have to really think much about it. It's taken for granted that this is there, right? But it's not always going to be, because it takes people to maintain it.
You realize it even more when you go to another country and they have different standards or levels of development of their infrastructure, and you go, oh wow, like this is a very well thought out system that you like Josh said, you just like think it's there, it's always going to be there until it's not, and then you realize how much you've become reliant on it.
And I think some of the biggest examples right now in the United States are bridge failures, because those are obviously spectacular failures of infrastructure where a bridge will collapse. And, unfortunately, usually people die when that happens. And that kind of stuff, because usually a bridge just doesn't collapse out of nowhere. So it's over a waterway, and it's old. And that's the thing. We have a lot of older infrastructure in this country that we kind of need to spruce up a bit.
So what happens in a situation where the infrastructure is not taken care of is that the passengers or the people no longer have the promise of safety, I guess,
right,
or like some level of safety. There's also the convenience of a bridge maybe going over like a gorge, and it might be even a short thing, but it may save 30 minutes off their trip. Otherwise, they have to go around.
Well, that's evident here where I live in Florida, because we have a lot of waterways. When a bridge is like being under construction or you can't use it, it might take you 45, 50 minutes, an hour to get around, because you have to go to another bridge or go around everything totally. So it saves time, money, and it's security too. So if you think about it, it's like if you called an ambulance, it's just a faster way to get from place to place.
And they all serve their purpose, and they all do different things. And it's important to know that it is one ecosystem where many different pieces live. And I think we see that even now too, where It goes from one ecosystem to another. Like if you have overseas shipping, if you have something like that, you see that.
Yeah.
But there's long before, like, you have long established shipping routes, you have railroads, you have roads. You had to have somebody think about what was needed to get from point A to point B. And there was struggle, like blasting through the mountains for the railroad or building a bridge. Like, these are not like small undertakings at all.
No, I mean, when you look back in history, like the Transcontinental Railroad, right? I mean, that was a railroad that went from East Coast to West Coast, and it was completely done. And people were building on both sides to get to the middle. And it's just an interesting review of history. Now, the building of which was probably not the labor that was used for that building was not the most what we would call like politically correct labor today. People weren't paid. It was a lot of shystering going on. But that happened, and that connected the country, right, Brian?
It did.
So let's talk a little bit more now. Let's spin this a little bit. Kind of talk about the mental side of it, what we call mental infrastructure.
So I think where we pick this up is the age we live in now, and the generation, I'll call it the Gen Xers, really, where the last generation, or you kind of have what's called the Zennials, that transitional thing going from Gen X to Gen Y. Everybody remembered what life was like prior to technological things, email,
Yep.
cell phone. It later became social media and things. What happened was, or even like, for example, remember MapQuest?
Yeah,
You get
exactly.
from point A to point B. You didn't have to actually read a map. It actually just, you'd print the instructions.
That was the first kind of GPS thing, but you didn't have a phone with you. You just printed it out, and then you had somebody reading it, or you read it.
Yes.
And it would be like, take a lleft, take a right, take a right, take a left,
But it was wonderful because it was actually like a personalized trip itinerary that you had to do. Otherwise, you spent a small fortune on Rand McNally maps, and you kept a stash of where you went, right? You kind of understood where that was going, and you couldn't ask for help by like just typing in your GPS. You had to read a map, and if you didn't, you had to get out and stop and talk to somebody to figure out where you are, where you're going.
Yep.
Well, what I've found is that you have all these conveniences that have now been built in to make it easy, and that's like the infrastructure that is kind of representative, like we talked about today, in physical infrastructure. But now if we take it as a mental exercise, the difference of physical infrastructure and mental infrastructure is that the mind grows stronger when it's faced with problem and struggle, and it overcomes that.
Right. So we're talking about, like, now that I can just type into the GPS where I'm at, it actually knows where I'm at, so I can just type where I want to go. I'm not exercising that part of my brain anymore, right, Brian?
Yes.
Yep.
So even like when you talk about exercise regimens, if you want to do a specific activity, whatever it might be, you have to train your mind and your body in those cases to not follow the patterns. And that becomes uncomfortable for people because that signals some kind of growth or some kind of change they have to adapt to. Because there's so many different ways here's 25 different apps on how to get you from point A to point B. All you need to do is not even think about the name of the app. You just type in maps and it's there. It's become so easy to find that when there's real struggle that's presented, some people aren't as sure what to do anymore. And when I say that, it's for a generation that has never had that kind of struggle.
Never
to
had
have to apply their mental fortitude.
They never had to do it. They just took it for granted that I can go to my phone or I can go to Alexa, Google, Siri, and just say something, and they'll figure it out. It'll help me figure it out, right?
So how do you build mental infrastructure? That's something that it's a good term. I think people can now think about it, but what if we said that there's already good mental infrastructure in place for making it convenient? Is the goal of mental infrastructure to make things convenient, or is it to make it so that you struggle and you have extra built in?
For me, I think the goal is, I think good infrastructure is invisible, right? Like when we talked about roads and everything, we don't really realize they're there but we utilize it all the time. And I think the same thing with mental infrastructure, personally. If it's good infrastructure, we're not going to know it's there. But the problem is now, like you were saying, is that we've had a lot of people have never had to like exercise these muscles before. So the minute it gets a little uncomfortable, a lot of people kind of tap out of it because if you're in a rut or just in one way of thinking, it's so easy to stay there. But what we should focus on more is why would it be important to flex those mental infrastructure muscles? Kind of like why would it be important to do something totally different? Like why would it be important for me to put the GPS down one day when I was trying to find something? And I could still have the GPS to fall back on, like if I got totally borked, But what if, like, why is that important? And I believe it's important just because it's a mental process of thinking. It's helping you problem solve. And people, when they are problem solving, I think that we just become better all round people, like in all kind of walks of life. Like it's going to be easier for you to solve a problem at work when you've solved one in your personal life. It's going to be easier for you to have relationships with people because relationships are work and there's problem solving all the time. But if you just refuse to do it, then it's just kind of taking the easy way out. Right, Brian?
Yeah, I want to harken back to what you said earlier on when you were explaining the different types of infrastructure. You said there's planes, trains, automobiles.
Yeah,
Yes, I
seaports.
said that.
Yeah.
All those different kinds of things. Walking, biking.
Yeah.
And even before you said, like, here's a car and you go from point A to point B, right? Because we started talking about interstates and then you expanded it, right? But you identified that there were many types of infrastructure pieces that created the meta infrastructure, like the mega one.
Correct.
Right. And so I want to harken back to that because I think that what's happened now is like, how do you get from point A to point B? Oh, I get in my car, I put on Google and I go.
Yeah.
And
instead of just going, I get in my car, then I think about where I'm going and I just go.
Yeah. Or how would I like to get there?
Right.
What's my experience that I'd like to be? Should it be a plane? Could I fly? Should I walk?
Should I take the interstate? Yeah.
Yeah. There are definitely roads that are more familiar and then there are roads less traveled. But I think that the roads that are traveled often are so wide and so convenient that you don't ever explore the road less traveled as much anymore.
Right. You don't have to, so you're not going to,
So what makes people want to do that?
I don't know.
Explore?
Like I think people are natural explorers. Like we're curious, right? Like you just want to do things. Like I've done that before. I've always said the best way to find out where you're going is to get lost. Or the best way to find out where something is to just go for it and get lost. And we've done that many times. Like we've talked about our famous trip to Mall of America when we were kids. That we hopped in the car. We said, well, we know it's off 94, so we just keep going. And we didn't go far enough. We thought we had gone too far. And we just saw another mall and said, let's go there. But in that whole process, we learned after where Mall of America was. We never made that mistake again to get there, right?
Yep.
We got there again, like senior skip day, we got there. And we did other things. We found other things along the way. We were like, oh, this is how this puts together. So we started understanding how the jigsaw puzzle of the city we were living by worked, right?
Yes.
And so that kind of started clicking in our minds. Like I always say that, like, if you know the pieces around something, the piece in the middle becomes more clear, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's important.
There was I was talking to my friend who does, he's a senior developer in all things tech. He was saying, wait a minute, all things tech, I say that very generally, but he said that when you first learned how to troubleshoot code back in the day, and back in the day for that is like, 20 years ago.
Right.
He said, if there's a problem in line 73, you're taught to look at line 72.
Right.
Because it might be the answer that helps answer what's going on in 73. It's a contextual awareness piece of it. There's this thing, one of these memes, I pulled it up while we're sitting here, and I love it. It's this picture of this dog, like, chillaxing on the couch. And it says, we were wolves once, wild and wary, stealth and cunning. Then we noticed you had couches.
Right.
I think, honestly, that picture, though, is like the dog wanted comfort and ease. And we seek out comfort and ease because it's comfortable and it's easy. When you struggle at the beginning of it, every subsequent thing comes easier. Josh and I never got lost in the Mall of America ever since then. But I can probably name a time when you maybe navigated to somewhere where you weren't as familiar, used your GPS, and you've said, I wouldn't know how to get here if I didn't have the GPS. Like,
right.
You still don't know. after how many times of visiting something to get
Right.
there because you never struggled at first.
Right. You never had to make that connection of the new learning experience, right? So you
Hmm.
never, it's like, oh, my GPS just told me, and I just use it again. So don't worry about it.
I think the encouragement here for people is to build out their toolkit. Not
Yeah.
every tool applies.
Yeah.
And
Like sometimes you need a hammer instead of a screwdriver, and sometimes you need the screwdriver instead of a hammer,
and
you know?
sometimes you need a different toolbox entirely.
Right. So that's the kind of the exercise, right? Like, how would you think, this is what I'm going to be like thinking about too. How would you think to be able to start doing this? Start exercising muscles less frequently used type thing.
The easiest way to start is turning off your phone.
Exactly. Or have like times when you're not going to rely on your phone. Period.
Yeah.
Like I've started doing that, especially in the evening now. Like I've been trying to kind of tap out of my phone just to spend more time with at home. But I think like during the day at work, even like between noon and 2, I'm not going to use this thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to when I go to lunch today, I'm not going to Google what's the best places to eat around me.
You're just
I'm
going
going
to
to go out
look.
and I'm going to explore. Like, this might take me 15 minutes, but I'm going to go find something, or I'm going to ask somebody else where they ate. You know?
Yeah. Here's a great way. So you're going out to do errands. Let's say you're going to go to the grocery store. Let's say you're going to whatever, right? Like leave your phone at home. I know you feel naked when you do that. Like you'd almost rather like leave your pants at home than leave your phone at home.
True story. True story. I once forgot my phone going to work, and I turned around and come and got it back. Like another day, I forgot my wallet, and I said, "Screw it, I got my phone." Because I didn't even care.
Yeah. Yep.
So that's how dependent we become on them.
What do you think?
Right,
Should we
Brian?
just leave it? Yeah, I
I
would
think
agree.
so.
All
Yeah,
right.
we stumbled through that, but that's all right.
Until next time, this is Brian
And this is Josh.
for Curiosity Continuum.